So, let's talk. You said you were Christian, had a spiritual background. You assumed you would go into Christian music. Maybe that was your intention when you came to Belmont. Talk a little bit about that. Why did you not wind up in Christian music? Was there something particular that happened, or was it just how things unfolded in front of you? Or tell us about that.
It was a learning, prayerful process. I will say I did come to Belmont with every intention of being a Christian artist, Christian solo artist. That's what I was thinking when I moved to Belmont, and even did a little EP my first year with friends, at Belmont, and I've still got that somewhere. My kids laugh at that and my pictures and all that. But I will say, let me make really clear that I can't speak to the Christian industry today. I've been out of that world for 25, 30 years. So nothing I say is to reflect on the Christian industry today, because I don't know enough to speak about it. But I will say at that point, when I got here, I pretty quickly began to hear things that made me feel like the Christian industry was kind of not what it was painted to be. Mm-hmm. And that there was a lot of, opportunism for people who weren't even believers. Like it was a business first and Christian second. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And there were people in it maybe that should not have been in it. And, for example, like all the musicians, session musicians and stuff that I worked with, or most, I won't say all, but they would run the other way when they got called for a Christian session, because they never knew whether they were going to get paid or not. And it really kind of disillusioned me for a while, because in my mind, the Christian industry ought to be the primo, the best paying, the best on time payment, and working with the most integrity and with the best wishes and kind of everything top tier, as a testimony to Christ and his faithfulness and all that stuff. And so when I started learning, as a green behind the ears or wet behind the ears kid from East Texas, that this Christian industry that I in a way had kind of idolized and built up in my mind kind of wasn't that way behind the scenes, that bothered me. And so that kind of made me think, is that an industry that I want to get into, especially if I can't get paid, well. Mm-hmm. But also God kind of began to show me that desire that I thought, or that given in my mind was, well, I'm a Christian, so if I'm going to go into music, it's got to be Christian music. I began to kind of re-examine that, and through a lot of talks with pastors and even my brother Paul that I mentioned earlier, I began to see that another problem in the Christian industry was guys like me. I was part of the problem, in that Christians, but sometimes immature Christians, feel like it's their duty to go into Christian music, and just by virtue of the fact that they're up here on a stage and the audience is down here below, like an audience will sometimes put too much stock in what this Christian, who may not even be as mature a believer as they are, they'll put stock in what that artist says. And I realized that if an artist isn't really careful, and in my mind called to that ministry, like a specific call to that ministry, like a lot of Christian artists, I'm sorry, can do damage to the kingdom, because they're not mature believers. They have no business preaching. If you're getting into doctrine and stuff, if your goal is to be a Christian entertainer, great. Like, we need good Christian entertainment. But if you're crossing the line into almost a pastor role, that can be dangerous if you're not called into that ministry. And I began to realize, I don't know that I'm called to that level of ministry. I would love to be able to entertain people on a Christian level, but I came to feel like I wasn't called specifically to that ministry. So at that point, I began to want to be just as good of a Christian witness as I could in a secular world. And then I got into the country as I began to get my feet wet and really make my way into the country market. It was like I looked around and most of the people I was working with were Christians.
Unexpectedly.
Unexpectedly. I expected, to feel like, it was a dark place, and it was like just behind the scenes, I'd say at least half the people I was working with was, of like mind with me. And so it felt right at home.
Right.
So it was really comfortable.
Well, I want to just hit on one thing you said there. It just as a general warning to people, we tend to put people that get up on stage on a pedestal of some sort, right? This country has a big problem with worshiping musicians and athletes and all those kind of things. And, we need to be really careful about that and understand that those people on that stage or in that particular position are people, right? They have faults. They're not perfect in any stretch. And in some cases, who we see on stage is not even the person that we think they are. Right?
I would say most often.
And so, just don't, chasing a little bit of a rabbit here, but, I know when the kids were younger and they really like to go to concerts, and it bothered me because when I looked at a secular concert or even a Christian concert, it appeared that the people on stage were being worshiped, right? I mean, if you just look at it just from a totally objective standpoint, it appears that's what's going on, right? Yeah. And that bothered me. And so, I was always careful with the kids about trying to, understand, hey, it's one thing to enjoy music, but don't misplace worship. Worship belongs to God, right? And we got to be really careful that we don't worship musicians or athletes or any kind of entertainment star or politicians or anything, right? Worship belongs to God. And so just warning to people not to get hung up on that.